Picture a coolly brisk morning. Sun barely shining, grass wet with dew, and before you even get the chance to gaze at the clouds or trees, a massive explosion in a mere snap of seconds ends your life and that of everyone around you. Now, picture another side of the spectrum. You're high in the chain of command in a reputable government, and the final seal of approval is needed from you to move forward with an unmanned lethal airstrike against a potential terrorist threat. Knowing full well the risk of innocent civilians killed, property and landscape damage, the risk of ever-growing hatred against your country, how will you make your final decision? Hi, my name is Christopher, and today we will be talking about just war theory and its ethical implications on the modern age of drone warfare. So in the first article that I chose, basically this Jacksonville public policy and philosophy professor more or less delineated the principles of what is known as just war theory, which basically just tells you, how can we, go to war in a just way and so on and so forth. And so what he notes specifically is that this culmination of war-related philosophy over the ages has led to this now long-standing tradition of, what makes a war just. And those principles and qualities include right cause, it must be declared by an appropriate governmental authority, devoid of tyranny, of course. It must be a last resort measure. There must be a goal of a future state of peace in mind. The violence must reflect proportionality to the harm inflicted. There must be right intention behind it. And of course, there must be a reasonable chance of succeeding. And so basically what sparked this discussion was a leaked white paper of the Obama administration's justification of drone use. And in short, it kind of came down to being justified over loosely defined terms or even redefined terms such as imminent or capture feasibility, and kind of a secretively loose adherence to just war principles. In particular, the clever and abusive manipulation of words he suggests is basically an insufficient moral justification for drone strikes. And so following that, he notes the main questionable principle in the scenario, and that is that there must be a goal of future peace in mind. And, of course, any senior official would, justify it and, say, yeah, we have a goal of future peace in mind. Peace through strength, perhaps, or something along those lines. But this ultimate use of unmanned strikes does spark visceral hatred among our enemies. And so the question becomes, while this imminent, and you can't see me, but I'm putting quotes over imminent, while this imminent threat is nullified, what long-term outcome will this fostered hatred have on the future state of peace? Will more strikes equal more peace, or will this only breed more hatred and, will inevitably repeat this cycle? And so by the end, the writer, Freiberger, suggests it's not that we have this drone technology that is the problem, it's our evasion and manipulation of traditional justification standards that kind of seems to pair so easily with it. And to quickly support Freiberger's claim that our leaders are so easy to manipulate these standards, we see later in early 2016, under the Obama administration again, a form of loose and convenient wording for justification. Specifically when the U.S. at the time deployed unmanned, deadly strikes among some 6+ countries across Central and South Asia and North Africa and the Middle East. The senior officials at the time attempted to justify this strike by describing it as precise, closely supervised, effective, indispensable. And the thing that they noted and emphasized the most was that these actions were lawful. And of course, in this instance, lawful had a specialized meaning, a sort of loose interpretation, as these proposals were, and you can't see me again, but I'm quoting, by executive branch lawyers behind closed doors, withheld from public and even from Congress, and shielded from judicial review, end quote. And so this action is more or less a deviation from, say, that, appropriate government authority principle or that proportionality principle, in the latter specifically because we launched strikes across multiple nations. But not only that, this supposed lawfulness of, such actions kind of turned a blind eye to other factors, especially ethical factors, the other principles of just war theory that I previously mentioned that do go into this decision-making. And so what are the applicable frameworks in these scenarios? Ultimately, just war theory and the aforementioned examples of, the Obama administration's, justifications, all of that to me brings three main frameworks to mind. Just theory, which I would argue is a synthesis of both duty and virtue ethics. The former, placing heavy emphasis on universalism, right action, the latter prioritizing proper virtues, of course. Suffice to say, just theory specifies a universal set of rules and principles to be followed, which, is associated with duty ethics. And also, on top of that, the just war theory incorporates specific virtues, such as being of right intention or having peacefulness in the mix. But on the flip side, however, the Obama administration, despite claiming to have followed just war principles in these instances, took a rather flexible approach in doing so, I would say. And so, when I think of the word flexibility, I'm immediately drawn to, say, pragmatism and its use in crisis situations, particularly in times of war. And so pragmatism, though being contextual in nature and evaluating competing values flexibly, ultimately puts us at risk of something called moral relativism when abused. And so, as mentioned in the lecture, this kind of suggests that there might not really be any right answers. So one could argue that anything goes, especially if, you can cleverly manipulate language to loosely align yourself with these supposed principles. And so the dilemma, as mentioned before, it's not so much the existence of the drone technology itself, it's the evolution or even manipulation of traditional just war standards that couples it. And while this is kind of one of my questions I've compiled, it makes you wonder, should we really change our longstanding traditions with regard to war ethics? Should we more clearly define these principles, add on to them, or manipulate or remove some? After all, just as the times change, so does war. And so that is my presentation for you today. I hope you take a peek at some of the discussion questions I've provided, and I thank you so much for watching.